Free Julian Assange! Free Julian Assange! Free Julian Assange!
I'm Amy Goodman in Boston. As we sit down with Noam Chomsky, I asked him about the arrest of Julian Assange.
The Assange arrest is scandalous in several respects. One of them is just the effort of governments, and it's not just the U.S. government. The British are cooperating. Ecuador, of course, is now cooperating. Sweden before had cooperated. The efforts to silence a journalist who was producing materials that people in power didn't want the rascal multitude to know about, okay? That's basically what happened. WikiLeaks was producing things that people ought to know about those in power. People in power don't like that, so therefore we have to silence it, okay? This is the kind of scandal that takes place, unfortunately, over and over.
What do you make of our effort to extradite and indict and punish probably Julian Assange?
I'm deeply concerned by what's happened today. We look back at the Obama administration's decision during his time not to do this, not to try to extradite Assange and charge him because of their concern about how this government action would impinge on freedom of the press. This is a blow to transparency and a blow to a free press when you have a situation where our government, is in a position where they can basically create this climate of fear against somebody or those who are publishing things that they don't like, or saying things that they don't like. And that's the concern here. This is a threat to journalists, but it's also something that threatens every American, because the message that we are getting, that the American people are getting by what's happened here today is be quiet, toe the line, otherwise there will be consequences.
So you served 2 tours of duty in the Middle East. You're currently a major in the Army National Guard. Assange, along with Chelsea Manning, spread classified information that prosecutors at Manning's trial claimed could have brought harm to U.S. service members in Iraq and Afghanistan. Do you agree with that? And what do you think about Assange's extradition and prosecution in the U.S.?
Look, over time, there hasn't been any proof. What we have seen is that so much of the information that's been released has informed the American people about actions that were taking place that they should be aware of. It provided transparency around issues both related to civil liberties as well as actions that our military was taking in the Middle East that they should not have been. So really, I think what's happening here is some form of retaliation coming from the government saying, hey, this is what happens when you release information that we don't want you to release. And I think that's why this is such a dangerous and slippery slope, not only for journalists, not only for those in the media, but also for every American, that our government can and has the power to kind of lay down the hammer to say, be careful, be quiet, and fall in line. Otherwise, we have the means to be able to come after you.
So you don't think that he should have been extradited, and you don't support his prosecution in the U.S.?
I think the charges about hacking, look, those can and should be worked out in the court of law. My point is that I think there's a bigger issue at play here. There's a reason why the Obama administration chose not to extradite and prosecute Assange, because they understood the danger. They understood the danger of the government coming in and controlling essentially what information is and is not being released. We can go back to the release of the Pentagon Papers as an example. We can look to how the American people have benefited from some of this information being released. So I think we've got to look at it within this larger context here and make sure that we understand what's at stake and actually the danger of what happens when we have people in government, whether it's this administration or a future administration, basically saying, hey, look, we can call WikiLeaks a foreign intelligence agency. We can designate an individual as a foreign asset or this or that, simply because they don't like the information that's being published or they don't like the things that you're saying.
Diane Abbott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Home Secretary for his account of events. On this side of the House, we're glad that Julian Assange will be able to access medical care, treatment and facilities, because there have been worrying reports about his ill health. Of course, at this point, this is all a matter for the courts. But on this side of the House, we want to make the point that the reason we are debating Julian Assange this afternoon, even though the only charge he may face in this country is in relation to his bail hearings, the reason we are debating this afternoon is entirely to do with the whistleblowing activities of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. It is this whistleblowing activity into illegal wars, mass murder, murder of civilians and corruption on a grand scale that has put Julian Assange in the crosshairs of the US administration. It is for this reason that they have once more issued an extradition warrant against Mr. Assange. The Home Secretary will note that Mr. Assange complained to the UN that he was being unlawfully detained as he could not leave the Ecuadorian embassy without being arrested. And in February 2016, the UN panel ruled in his favour, stating that he had been arbitrarily detained and should be allowed to walk free and compensated for his deprivation of liberty. Mr. Assange hailed that as a significant victory, called the decision binding, but the Foreign Office responded by saying this ruling changes nothing. I note it was the Foreign Office that responded, not the Home Office or the Ministry of Justice. The Foreign Office has no responsibility for imprisonment and extradition in this country, but it is, of course, interested in relations with allies and others. We have precedent in this country in relation to requests for extradition to the US when the US authorities raise issues of hacking and national security. I would remind the House of the case of Gary McKinnon. In October 2012, when the current Prime Minister was Home Secretary, an extradition request very similar to this one was refused. And we should recall what WikiLeaks actually disclosed. Who can forget the Pentagon video footage of a missile attack in 2007 in Iraq which killed 18 civilians and 2 Reuters journalists? It is the monumental amount of leaks such as this that lifted the veil on US-led military operation in a variety of theatres, none of which have produced a favourable outcome from the people of those countries. Julian Assange is not being pursued to protect US national security. He is being pursued because he has exposed wrongdoing by US administrations and their military forces. And we only have to look at the treatment of Chelsea Manning to see what awaits him if he's extradited to the US. Ms. Manning has already been incarcerated between 2010 to 2017. She was originally sentenced to 35 years. Her indefinite detention now is because she refuses to participate in partial disclosure, which would allow whistleblowers to be pursued, not the perpetrators. And her human rights and protections as a transgender woman have been completely ignored. Her human rights as a transgender woman have been completely ignored, and I would hope members on the other side of the House would take that seriously. And what it has to do with Julian Assange's case is this could be the type of treatment that he could expect if he's extradited to the US. In this country, we have protections for whistleblowers, including the Public Interest Disclosure Act 1998 and others, even if some of us feel these protections should be more robust. Underpinning this legislation is the correct premise, not that anyone can leak anything they like, but there should be protection afforded to those who take personal risk to disclose wrongdoing where that disclosure serves the public interest. Julian Assange is at risk of extradition to the US precisely because on this side of the House we believe he has disclosed material that is in the utmost public interest. This is now in the hands of the British law courts. We have the utmost confidence in the British legal system, but we would say on this side of the House, we would be very concerned that on the basis of what we know, Julian Assange was extradited to the US.
Mr. President, do you still love WikiLeaks?
I know nothing about WikiLeaks. It's not my thing. And I know there is something having to do with Julian Assange. I've been seeing what's happened with Assange, and that will be a determination, I would imagine, mostly by the Attorney General, who's doing an excellent job. So he'll be making a determination. I know nothing really about him. It's not my deal in life.
What would you like to see happen? What punishment?
I don't really have any opinion. I know the Attorney General will be involved in that, and he'll make a decision. Okay?